Although it was a time of innovation and wealth, the Gilded Age caused several different reactions that led to government reform. Railroads were a necessary utility for industry and farming during the Gilded Age. Railroads made it more convenient to transport the country's natural resources, and it enabled expansion.
The railroad practice is how two different competing railroads conducted their business. One railroad would give special discounted rates to ship their products with them and charge other companies more. This happened by large companies making deals with railroads to get favorable rates that would then be denied to competitors. These companies were referred to as trusts. These trusts had financial interests in the railways themselves. This type of business activity created monopolies and was considered unfair by the people.
During the late 1800s, an organization of farmers, known as the Grangers, worked together to push for the regulation of storage fees and railway rates that were unfairly being overcharged by railroads, storage houses, and grain elevators through the state legislation. This push for regulation is known as the Granger Laws, which were a series of laws passed from 1869 to 1875 that were legislated in the southern states after the Civil War. The railroads were in shock from this and immediately started lawsuits against these commission-enforced rates. The main argument for the railroads was that the state could not come in and change the way they ran their business, and they should be protected by the laws already enacted. This meant that the Grange could in no way change the rates put in by the railroads, storage houses, and grain elevators because they did not have the right to change the rates. Doing so was in violation of the 14th Amendment.
Block voting is a group of voters that are strongly motivated by a specific common concern or group of concern. Farmers have an interest in food prices, food exports, and farm subsidies. By voting together in elections, block voters overpowered the voting rolls. They formed voting alliances to win their cause. Munn versus Illinois was one of the Granger cases involving the validity of Illinois law that established a maximum charge that could be imposed by grain storage facility operators. With pressure from the Grangers, a 7-2 majority upheld the Illinois law and reasoned that a state has power to regulate businesses that may impact the public. The court refused to accept the opposing argument that the Due Process Clause, a safeguard in the 5th and 14th Amendment protecting the denial of property, had been violated or that a state role in commerce regulation clashed with the congressional role. Chief Justice Morrison Brimmick Waite ruled that a state might act, even though in doing so it may indirectly operate upon commerce outside its jurisdiction.
St. Louis and Pacific Railway versus Illinois of 1886, also known as the Wabash case, concerned the subject of the power of the state legislature to regulate tolls for passengers and transportation of freight over the railroads, and the question if such regulations made under state authority are valid. The Wabash case resulted in the denial of state power to regulate interstate rates for railroads, and the decision led to the creation of the Interstate Commerce Commission. The Interstate Commerce Act was passed in 1887. Shippers and farmers demanded that Congress legislate laws to regulate freight rates. The Interstate Commerce Act required railroads to charge fair and reasonable rates to their customers.
Manufacturing fields grew significantly during the Gilded Age. The percentage of Americans working in agriculture fell from 50% of the American workforce in 1870 to just over 30% in 1910. The Knights of Labor was a dominant labor union during the Gilded Age. The union, made up of a broad range of workers, was established in 1869 and was led by Uriah Stevens.
The Knights advocated for the 8-hour workday and sought to gain respect of America's factory workers.
The International Ladies Garment Workers Union was the largest labor union represented in the United States during the 20th century with approximately 450,000 members. Members included female, Jewish, and Italian immigrants who were employed in sweatshops. The union fought for the improvement of working conditions for women. The Triangle Waste Company fire of 1911 led to the investigation of over 1,800 factories in over 20 different industries. These investigations resulted in the legislation of 56 bills, including a 54-hour work week for minors and women, industry safety codes, workers' compensation, and the outlaw of nighttime factory hours for women.
Collective bargaining was a tactic used by union members to make negotiations with employers concerning pay, hours, benefits, and safety policies. Due to immigration pouring into the United States during the mid-1800s, overpopulation caused cities such as Chicago to become impoverished. With smallpox and TB on the rise, doctors' visits became vital for survival, but most families could not afford them. These strenuous conditions led to slums in need of social welfare. The Hull House, established by Jane Addams in 1889, was by far the most influential. The Hull House was a settlement house open to low-income, native-born, and immigrant men and women to stimulate improvement in the industrial districts of Chicago. The Hull House, made up of 13 buildings, provided kindergarten and daycare for children of working mothers, an unemployment bureau, libraries, a theater, music and art classes, and an art gallery. The Hull House became home to over 2,000 people each week. This was certainly not the last of Jane's achievements. Jane Addams helped launch the Immigrants Protective League, the Juvenile Protective Association, the nation's first juvenile court, and the Institute for Juvenile Research. Jane was also a supporter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the American Civil Liberties Union, and women's suffrage. Jane became the first female recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931. Jane Addams made a tremendous impact by giving opportunities to low-income individuals and creating the foundation for social work in America. Thomas Nast, known as the father of the American cartoon, created caricature cartoons to bring about awareness of the corruption in America. Nast made it his personal mission to bring down the corrupt politician Boss Tweed through his cartoons. Tweed tried to manipulate Nast by offering him money to study art in Europe, but Nast refused because he was determined to put Tweed behind bars. Thanks to Thomas Nast's artwork, Boss Tweed was removed from power in 1871 and eventually arrested and charged with fraud. Thomas Nast is well known for his creation of Santa Claus and the Republican elephant symbol.